I was in Ellsworth and curious to hear about the guinea hen I heard mentioned in a conversation Corey was having. So I introduced myself, and she told me, she started to tell me this story that I have recorded here, and I loved it. So here it is.
My name is Corry Pratt. I am the owner of the Maine Alpaca Experience and Northern Solstice Alpaca Farm.
You mentioned a guinea hen that came onto your
Yes.
land.
We have our farm in Unity. We have right now 39 alpacas. This was a few years ago, so probably had 15 or 16 alpacas. And they make an alarm call sound when they're frightened. And it could be anything from a groundhog to a coyote. So we always run to see what the issue is. And we saw there was a fox in the field, and the fox was carrying something in its mouth, but too far away to identify. And as it kept running closer, the alpacas alarmed again and scared the fox, who dropped what it was carrying, which we later identified as a bird of some type, a large bird. The bird continued to run toward the pasture and jumped up over the fence and into our pasture. We thought it was a chicken, but it didn't look like any chicken we had ever seen. Turned out to be a guinea hen, which was later identified by a farm visitor, and it was in rough shape. It had been gnarled and it was rattled quite a bit from its ordeal with the fox. So we put out some straw, we put out some bird seed that we had on hand and a bowl of water, and the bird we thought would be either have died or be gone by morning, and it stayed. And then it continued to stay for days and days and moved itself closer to the barn, where it ultimately took up roosting every evening. And we found out what it was. We bought specific grain for a guinea, identified that it was a male guinea. So we named him. He became Kevin with a Y. And a friend of ours who raises guineas a couple years later was worried, had never heard of one surviving alone, thought he would be lonely, and said that he needed a girlfriend. So she brought us a female guinea, and we penned her and let Kevin have 2 or 3 days to get used to her. And she didn't like the pen at all, so we let her out, and they got along famously. And that's now been 8 years. And we have the 2 of them existing on the farm, and they make the rounds and eat all of the fleas and ticks and everything we don't want on an alpaca farm anyway. And they get their occasional watermelon, strawberries, or blueberries. And they're just like an old grouchy married couple on the farm. They're doing great. And Kevin is aging. We see some signs. He can't jump to the roost like he used to, so we now have to put up a stepladder every night so he can jump from the ground to the fence to the stepladder to his roosting spot.
Do they interact with you?
They do. They'll let me feed them within a couple of feet. I've had to catch them before where they've had an issue. One had a toenail break and where they had some bleeding I took care of. They're not fond of being handled, but they'll tolerate it. They get along very well with the alpacas, and in the cold of the winter, they do have a heat light, and they also have a heating mat, but they love to snuggle up to the alpacas when they're laying on the ground. And we have mangers for hay, and they will also burrow down into the straw or the hay that's in the manger. And they're very comfortable around people and our farm visitors.
Well, that's lovely. They found paradise.
They seem to be pretty happy. We love them. We never imagined we'd have birds. That wasn't in the plan, but now we can't imagine being without them. I called Corry today, and she gave me this news.
Well, day before yesterday, we heard our alpacas and our guinea hens in quite a commotion and wanted to find out what was going on. And we looked out to see a third guinea hen, and our birds were a little bit upset about it, but still he kept trying to get closer and closer to the farm. And they were chasing him off, and they were having a little back and forth battle about whether he was going to be allowed in the pasture. And then eventually it was dark, so that's roosting time. Our 2 went into the barn to roost, where they always go, and the other bird went up into a tree. The next morning we came out to find that he was right back with our 2, and now had joined them, and they're circling the farm every morning. They just walk around and collect their bugs and do whatever birds do. He had joined them, but he was about 10 paces behind them. By the second night, he went right in the barn when it was roosting time and decided he was going to jump right up on the same roost with our two. And today, they are just like a family that has never been apart. We seem to be the home for wayward guineas.
Well, that sounds great.
Thank you, Maggie.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.